In this quick video, we'll go over the replacing of front shock assemblies and rear struts on your 8th generation Honda Civic. This is a fairly common issue. They go over time, and it's generally an easy fix and cheap to do yourself. So let's get started. Now this car is fully stock, and you can see that I can't even get 2 fingers in between the top of the tire and the bottom of that fender. These shocks are just gone all the way down to the bottom. There's no play, there's no bounce. We're going to start by lifting up the hood. Use that second hole there for the rod. Keeps that hood vertical, gives you more space. You're going to peel off a little bit of the weather stripping and pop off this plastic. That'll expose the 3 nuts that hold the top of that shock assembly. And they're not easy to get to. We'll go back to that. Lift the front of the car and put it on a jack stand. Remove the wheel and set it to the side. With the wheel off, here are the components you're going to be working on. This right here is a speed sensor, and it should be clipped in there, but that's already broken. You've got these 2 bolts that go through the top of your steering knuckle. That is the bottom of your shock assembly. Then you've got this 1 bolt here that holds in your brake line. Spray some PB Blaster on these components and let that soak in for a little bit. After that's had some time to soak in, start removing these bolts. Take your time with the smaller one here. As you'll see in the next clip, they can present a problem. You're going to need an open-end wrench to hold the back side of this nut here, and then if you've got an impact gun, it'll make this go quite easily. Now it's likely not necessary, but I put this little bench here just to hold up this assembly. Once it comes loose, I don't want that hanging and pulling on the axle. Next, we'll go back up top and start working on these nuts here. Now you don't have a lot of room here, so it takes some time. What I found was the rear was really difficult and it was tight, so get yourself a pipe if you need, make your ratchet into a breaker bar, pop it loose, and then you can take it out. I like also leaving this part for last because the weight of the assembly as it pulls down will keep pressure on the nut so it keeps ratcheting out. You see that it popped down. Now all you have to do is come down here and you should be able to wiggle that right out. Now I want to show this other side because even though these jobs are generally easy, there's always a snag you run into. So here the bolt that holds this brake line is seized and it's just stripped. So it's a good idea to have a set of these bolt extractors. They'll slip on. Once you turn them counterclockwise, they cut into that bolt and they back them right out. I'll put a link to them down below. Now before you reassemble, just inspect your parts, make sure there's no damage, no missing pieces, make sure that they all match up properly. They go back together in the reverse manner. If you have a helper, you can have them up top waiting for you with the nut to get that back on there. But it's totally doable on your own. Get all 3 on there, cinch them down, not all the way. I like to get them down just enough to hold it in place, then drop the car, then come back and tighten these down. With that in place, come back over here, get the through bolts in, cinch them down, get your brake line back on, your speed sensor clip back in, wheel back on, tighten it, drop the car. You're going to finish your front by coming back up top and tightening down these 3 nuts. After that, you want to make sure that you take the dust caps off of your old shock assemblies, put them onto the new ones. Then you're going to put this plastic piece back in, weather stripping, and then you're done. Moving on to the rear, this should be the easier part of the job. All we're doing are the struts, springs stay in place. We start off by going into the trunk. There's 3 little clips that hold some of this carpet in. You're going to pop those off, peel it back. You'll see the top of the strut. And there's 1 bolt there, there's 1 nut there, and you have to hold that bolt. So we'll go back to that and show you how to do that. I saw this done, I wasn't sure about it, but it worked out pretty well. Lift the entire rear of the car from this tow hook. Do that and get some jack stands underneath there. With the car up, take off the wheel and inspect your strut. You see that it goes through the body with just that 1 bolt that goes through the top. And then there's just the 1 nut and bolt on this passenger side that holds this together. I'll explain that later. Now just as a precaution, I'm going to take a jack and put it underneath this assembly here so that when I take the pin, that bolt out of the bottom of that strut, the force of that spring, if there's any there, doesn't send it down. If you're replacing a stock strut here, you're going to need a 5mm hex head socket to hold that bolt in place as you back this nut out. You'll have to hold it and back it all the way out. Once that's out, you should be able to push this down and easily get that out. Make sure you remove that rubber bushing that's up top. your new struts will come with replacements. Your new strut likely came compressed for shipping. Peel that off, it'll expand a little bit. Remove the top nut and bushing, and then install that into the vehicle in the reverse manner. Get the bushing and the washer and the nut in place up top. Again, I don't want to cinch this down all the way just yet. Just want to make sure it's centered. And then once I drop the car, I'll come back up and tighten it down. Now I want to show the difference between the passenger side and the driver's side. Here you have that bolt that goes all the way through with a nut that goes on the other end, tightens down, pinches, and holds it in place. For whatever reason, the other side isn't like that, and it presented a huge problem for me, and as I've read, turns out to be a common issue. Now here's the other side, and instead of a bolt that goes all the way through with a nut on the other side, it's a single bolt that goes through into this welded, threaded part. Of course, the bolt is rusted, completely seized, soaked it, did nothing, didn't want to use heat because there's rubber in there. So, Sawzall, cut-off tool, any means necessary. And once I cut through the bolt itself, I had to come back with a grinder and make sure it's all smooth to receive the new nut and bolt that I'm going to put in. But these kind of things are to be expected, especially with the simpler jobs. With the bottom of both struts in place, drop the car, go back up top, and tighten down those nuts. Now, one thing to notice, this is not stock, so it's a different way to hold that bolt in place. Normally, you'd use that 5mm hex head for this, and I'm not super thrilled about it, but for this, it's very tiny, almost like a little slot, and I don't even have an open end that small on me right now. So, using the crescent, you're going to hold that in place and cinch these down all the way, compress those bushings, make sure it's centered. Then you're going to close up the carpet, put the clips back in, and you're done. I wish I had a better before picture, but you can see here in the top photo, that wheel is way up into the well, and in the bottom image, there's even ride height front and back, and you've got some room there. I like making these videos to show people these are things you can do easily yourself, and of course save money. And if you use the links below, I earn a whole 17 cents.